John Lennon's probably the more appropriate because it's
For the
we'll
British.
move up to Kurt from John Lennon.
Okay, go for it then.
Well, with Lennon, it involves the history of the CIA's MK Ultra, the project MK Ultra, which started in 1953, and it was an umbrella project which involved 149 sub projects, and the sub projects were the use of drugs, and their own documents say this: the use of drugs as unconventional warfare. Now, most people consider warfare, battles in foreign lands, but the best evidence shows that that warfare was going on in the United States against people like Tupac, as I just described, like his parents, the Black Panthers, but also against white activists, and particularly against white activists regarding psychedelics such as LSD. And so MK Ultra involved dozens of different drugs, and I show the list of the MK Ultra test drugs, and it's all the street drugs we know, plus more, non-street drugs like pharmaceutical drugs that the CIA used in their warfare against activists, anti-war activists, civil rights activists, etc. Now I show the evidence that they used it. Paul Robeson Jr. I don't know if you know Paul Robeson, but he's considered one of the best singers of his generation, and he was also a civil rights activist in the United States. And he died in 1970s, but he really put himself out of commission in 1961, because in 1961 his son says, his son was an adult by this time, and his son said that they dosed his drink. The CIA dosed his drink many times and made him think he was going insane. And then they actually dosed his drink, the Paul Robeson Jr.'s drink also. And so then they got him to a mental hospital because he thought he was losing his mind from all that acid, didn't know what it was at that point. And the mental hospital, they gave him over 50 electroconvulsive shock treatments at overly high doses and ruined his mind. So after that, though, in 1965, the assistant director of MK Ultra, Robert Lashbrook, went to London, and according to A.E. Hotchner, who was Ernest Hemingway's editor, he said that he went with tons of LSD, tons of agents, and loads of money. And he instructed those agents to get LSD in as many musicians' hands as possible. Now, why did he do that? And the best evidence shows they did that because he knew that the acid could hurt their best competency. It also could make them more easy to manipulate. And they wanted to use that acid. They wanted to have the musicians promote the acid for leftist activists, anti-war activists and civil rights activists, to hurt their best thinking and hurt their ability to stop the Vietnam War, hurt their ability to advance the cause of civil rights in the United States and across the world. And so what they did is they got a guy named dentist named John Riley, I believe, because several months after this, Robert Lashbrook came to London. This dentist, John Riley, ends up having George Harrison, John Lennon with their wives over for dinner, and doses their coffee with LSD. And Lennon was furious, and George Harrison said, "What's LSD? I never heard of it before." And so they were tripping, and then like a year later, more people just surrounded them saying it's not so bad, it's a big thing in the United States, and got them tripping again. But at first they were Lennon was really pissed off about it. And so then in 1967, I'm just going to switch to the Rolling Stones, because a guy by the name of Schneiderman, Dave Schneiderman, it came out in the Daily Mail that Dave Schneiderman they called him the Acid King. He was at a party of Keith Richards, and he got Mick Jagger to try acid for the first time in 1967, and thus promoting it, because the cops came in and arrested Jagger and Keith Richards, but didn't arrest Schneiderman. And the Daily Mail said it turns out Schneiderman was actually working for MI5 and the United States FBI undercover, and when he was acting as the Acid King. So that was an extension of MK Ultra, because that's the way it works. Tavistock, you know your Tavistock Institute, I bet, and MI6 collaborate, MI5 collaborate with the American CIA and the American FBI. And in the hierarchy of U.S. intelligence, there's about 14 plus U.S. intelligence agencies, but CIA is at the top, and they listen the most to CIA and possibly naval intelligence, but they also collaborate with British intelligence. And I show the evidence that this was another example of MK Ultra dosing, trying to promote acid through the musicians. So they did that. They made it popular, and then they dosed some of the leaders of the Students for Democratic Society, the top anti-war group in the United States, and they dosed some civil rights activists. They went around dosing different activists and led them to not be at their best. Some of the heads of the SDS ended up breaking up in 1969 after some of that dosing. They turned into the Weathermen. They just weren't, they were acting a bit irrational. I mean, not that they're blowing up buildings to stop the war was automatically wrong. It's just they were acting so irrationally. They definitely made it, bad. Just like they just smeared their reputations, and they smeared anti-war activist reputations with the way they were acting. They were acting really, they actually lauded Charles Manson, believe it or not, at one of their conferences. And Charles Manson, turns out, was a pawn of U.S. intelligence under the MK Ultra experiments. That just came out in a book called Chaos.
Yeah, we had him on.
You heard about him, yeah.
Yeah. What was Yoko Ono's role in this? Was she targeted as well?
Well, yeah, that's a little more controversial. I don't know for sure. I mean, she was said to come from one of the 5 leading Japanese banking families. And one of the latest biographies of John Lennon says that she introduced John Lennon to heroin the first time. And that is, not a surprise, because it does mirror Courtney Love introducing, Kurt Cobain to using heroin daily.